Hi, my name is George Cantor. I'm a research professor at the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon University, and I'm here today to talk to you about some ideas we have around building plant models and extending them to incorporate some interesting information. So normally the place we start with plant modeling is a geometric model, and so this is a point cloud model. In this case, as I'll talk about, we are using some semantic features to help build this point cloud model a little better, but it's just a point cloud model. It's a disorganized, unorganized group of points that represent the geometry of the plant. And we can add to that point cloud model semantic information. So we can start to, this is a model of a grapevine, so we can start to segment out canes and mark where the buds are and mark the trellis wire and so forth. And then finally, what we can do is we can create a dynamic model that captures how this plant will move when we start to interact with it physically. And so that's the overview of this talk, and I'll go into a little bit of detail about some of these ideas. We're talking about dormant season grapevines, and our experimental setup here is this robot with these two stereo camera pairs set up here on the top and the bottom. This is an autonomous robot, can navigate through a vineyard. In this case, we're navigating through in the wintertime when all the leaves are off the vine. It pulls up to a vine, and this is a linear slider. So it centers itself on a vine, it sweeps this slider back and forth, captures a bunch of images of the vine, and then we can do some interesting things with those data products. One of the things we can do is look for buds. So buds are little spots on the canes, on these little thin shoots that are coming off, where something is going to grow out of them in the next season. And so we can use deep neural network detector to detect buds in a vine, and then we can project that onto the 3D model, and that actually helps with building the model. So we have this, this pipeline for building the geometric and semantic model of a grapevine. We take the top stereo pair, we take the bottom stereo pair. We do, with each stereo pair, we do a dense stereo reconstruction. At the same time, we do this deep bud detection. So we have these discrete features on the images where the buds are. We project the detections from the bud detector onto the 3D point clouds. And this gives us a feature that helps us then register multiple point clouds together more effectively to get an overall point cloud of the whole vine. So we do this with the top camera, the bottom camera. We register these labeled point clouds together, and then we do some geometric steps and some region growing steps in order to segment out some semantically interesting parts of the vine. In particular, the canes as they grow off of the cordon of the vine, and counting the buds linearly out from the cordon. So this video just kind of captures that. This is the geometric model with the buds highlighted in green. And here we're segmenting out the canes coming off of the cordon. And finally, we count outward from the cordon all the buds and put them back on the canes. So at this point, we've got this semantic model where we know what the canes are, we know what the buds are, we know how things are connected together. And so the next step we can take here is to fit a sequence of rigid cylinders onto this tree-like structure that comes out of this semantic model. And we model the dynamics of the vine as mass spring damper system, where the rigid cylinders that are segments of the vine are connected by masses, by springs and dampers. And so the result is now I have this model down in the bottom right corner, which is a computer model that can simulate how this vine will interact when forces are applied to it. So why do we want to do this? Ultimately, the whole reason we're adding this information in these models is we want to be able to manipulate vines and other types of trees, other types of plants, which are flexible, they have some compliance. And one approach for doing that is to use reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning is essentially a trial and error approach where you have an actor like a robot do a large number of experiments, and it's trying to optimize some reward function as it's doing those experiments, and it trains a policy that tells it what to do in given states, and it learns by trial and error what that policy should be. Of course, for real robotics on real robotic systems, we don't have the time to do the millions of iterations you need to do in order to train a reinforcement learning policy. But if I have a digital tree model that reasonably well approximates the tree dynamics in a simulation environment, I can do many, many more experiments in parallel, and I can do enough experiments in simulation to train a model up. So this approach is basically to look at the actual vine, turn it into the point cloud, turn it into the dynamic model, and then import that dynamic model into a simulator where I can train a reinforcement learning policy. And then finally, I port that policy onto the real robot. So we've done this, the basic PPO reinforcement learning here, some sort of hand-tuned reward functions. And ultimately, it boils down to something like this. So in the top left corner here, we have in our lab, a robot scanning a little vine that's there. Once the vine is scanned, then in the top right corner here, we can build up this model, put the buds on it, turn it into the dynamic model that then finally in the, not finally, but in the bottom left corner, we use to train the reinforcement learning policy. And this, this goes on, millions of iterations of these training epochs are done here in the training. And then finally, once a policy is trained, we move it onto the robot and we can then address the vine in real time. So this is a preliminary result showing how this pipeline, first enabled by the modeling that includes semantics and dynamics, can be used to do robotic manipulation in these kinds of settings. So that's it. The big picture here is that you've seen a lot of work, I'm sure, in geometric modeling. That's just the start of plant modeling. We need to augment those models with knowledge, with semantics, and we can augment them also with dynamics. And if we do that, we can start to reason about how to physically interact with these plants. Of course, this is a lot of work over a long time, so I want to thank all the people involved and especially our sponsors and industry collaborators who have gotten us this far. Thank you.